what was the official title for tonight? It was something about can a Jewish state, how does modern Orthodoxy live in a Jewish state, something of that nature. Really what I wanted to talk about was Beit Shemesh, the incidents in Beit Shemesh. But I want to look at it a little bit differently. And it really flows because the last month or so, I've been going through a certain amount of cheshbon and nefesh about really defining what is the unique methodology of NISHMA, if there is a unique methodology, which I think it is, and how it is attempting to distinguish itself as distinct. And Beit Shemesh offers an excellent opportunity to try and look at something a little bit differently, which is really what I think what I'm trying to advocate for. When I was in university, I had a professor who I actually worked for. He was a professor of economics in the business school, and I became very close with him for a few years. He was a very interesting individual. He was the first German to come to the London School of Economics after the war. A very interesting individual and so forth. From what I heard from an Israeli who did work with this guy, it seems that because Israeli was concerned because this individual happened to be a Luftwaffe pilot. You didn't get a Luftwaffe pilot unless you had some kind of connection to the party. But it turns out he was a disciplined Luftwaffe pilot. It seems that they didn't like his attitude towards things, so that was a schus to him, in the sense that they didn't that he was, highly criticized by the forces that be. The fact is through the rest of his life, he was constantly involved in third world countries, and he prided himself on being friends with Papandreou in Greece, and he went to Israel and was involved in a project that built the highways there and so forth and so forth. So he was responsible for that, and he had and he was close friends with a lot of Africans and stuff like that. So he was an interesting guy. Anyways, one of the things he told me about was the following story. So we went to the London School of Economics with a professor who was a graduate school. Now in graduate school, you have to do well. You don't do well in one course, you're going to have problems in graduate school. So there's a professor who did a course, and one of the main marking methodologies of the course was a debate. People involved in the class had to participate in a debate between Marxism and capitalism. Right? Okay, so he started his course and started teaching it and told everyone in the class, hey, there's going to be a big debate between Marxism and that. You got to prepare that, you got to be ready for it, and so forth and so forth. But he didn't assign any sides to any of the students. After he got to know all the students, because of the conversations and stuff like that, when they were already heavily into the course, he then assigned the side to the debate that you had to take. And every Marxist in that class all of a sudden had to defend Adam Smith. And every capitalist in the class had to defend Karl Marx. Now the cognitive dissonance, he said, that this created in the classroom was unbelievable. Well, but I think he's an idiot. Well, then don't defend him and fail. That's nice and simple. So the truth is every one of these students learned to appreciate the other side very adamantly, because they found themselves, being forced to defend something that they thought was wrong before. And that was a remarkable learning experience. And I always feel that that should be applicable to Torah. If you really study Torah, you constantly are finding that you are trying to understand the other side. Okay, Rashi says this, what's Tosha Pshat? Tosha says, oh, what's Rashi mean? Going back and forth, so forth and so forth. And you see even in terms of the Gemara, you'll see a person says he holds like this, but he's talking to answer what the other person meant, and so forth and so forth. The unbelievable ability to know the other side. And the fact is that to me, that happens to be the very essence of the reason we paskin like Beis Hillel. The Gemara in Eruvin says that went back and forth who could paskin, and for many, many years there was no set psak halacha. If you follow Beis Hillel mutav, if you follow Beis Shammai mutav, you follow whoever you want to follow. But finally it came to a decision to be made. And supposedly the Baskol came out and said the halacha is like Beis Hillel. You have to follow Beis Hillel. Someone says, why do you have to follow Beis Hillel? Because Beis Hillel always quoted Beis Shammai first. You know how different it would be? Imagine that every time that a person who's a Tzioni, person that, you know, in the Yehuda Shomron and so forth, before he opens up his mouth, he has to present the sheet to the Satmar Rav. The Satmar Rav said this and this and this. Right? Imagine how different it would be. On the other hand, imagine how different it would be if anyone in the Torah Karta, before he opened his mouth, had to quote the Raya Cook. It would be a completely different world.
Okay, so I currently have to do mechila with at least 2 people here at the table for the views that I expressed earlier than this talk began, because we were talking about Ramat Beit Shemesh. And the reality is that any Haredi spitting, stoning, or intending with kavanah is probably thinking, oh my goodness, what a world we live in. It's going completely to pot, as it were, and we have to stop it now, and we're going to start with, unfortunately, a little 8-year-old girl.
Okay, so the fact is you have to understand what you're saying like this. When you're saying you have to know the other side. Beis Shammai knew the pshita of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel knew the position of Beis Shammai. They most likely could argue it. They still disagreed in the end. And not only disagree in the end, it's classic that when they came to trying to paskin the halacha, it became a little bit of violent in terms of the psak halachas that we hold like Beis Shammai. Supposedly what happened was that Beis Shammai saw they were a majority at one time, and I said, hey, you guys, we're in the majority here, let's lock all the doors. Say, okay, here's got a few halachas we're going to pass, and that day the psak came like Beis Shammai because they're in the majority. The fact is, to say that you know the other side doesn't mean that you justify it. It does not necessarily mean that you even validate it. But it does mean that you understand it, and you understand the essence of what's about. And what that leads to is understanding the value consciousness that is being presented and how you're responding to that value consciousness. Okay, like for example, one of the things that upset me in this regard is there was an article in the New York Times with Rabbi Dov Linzer. Dov Linzer is the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Chovei Torah. Yeshiva Chovei Torah is a controversial yeshiva because it is on the left wing of Orthodoxy, and there's a lot of issues about it and so forth and so forth. But I met Rabbi Linzer, a fine man and so forth. But the fact is that he wrote an article about Ramat Beit Shemesh attacking the views of the Charedim there in terms of sneakers. Now his basic idea was very simple, and he basically said, listen, the issue, this idea that it's a woman's fault for every sexual challenge. In other words, women are sexually sexual stimulus to men, therefore women have to cover themselves up. He says if you go through the Gemara, you see that the obligation is not necessarily on women to cover themselves up, the obligation on men to control themselves. So the truth is don't go around saying, women, you have to do this because I can't control myself. Go around and start saying, hey, maybe you should control yourself. Now, the truth is there's a lot of validity in his position. A lot of validity in his position. And the truth is, and also Rabbi Korobkin gave a shir to this extent, and it's actually on Kosher Tube as well, where he says that the men sit at the back of the bus. There's an interesting statement made by a philosopher by the name of Zizek. Okay. He's a modern philosopher, and Zizek points out something very interesting. He says that, I'm not sure if he was talking about Taliban or but in Afghanistan with the Taliban or in terms of Iran, he said that he's reading that they started to have this new law that women, right, could not walk in shoes where they could be heard. Okay, so even though they're all dressed over and so forth, and they're covered from head to toe and so forth and so forth, now it became the thing they can't wear shoes that click. Why? Because the fact is that was considered to be too much of a sexual stimulant. In other words, what Zizek says is what's occurring here is that women are becoming, they're just their presence is becoming a problem. This isn't what they're wearing, it's their presence, because all that they defined as is as a sexual stimulant. When beyond sexual object, sexual stimulant. And the fact is Rabbi Linzer points out the same idea, this idea. So he says, and if you saw one of the tapes of Ramat Bet Shemesh, one of the Charedim was saying, hey, we're just normal, and so forth and so forth. It's an interesting Rabbi Korobkin points out in his shir, but a statement of Rav Moshe, it says that, wait a second, someone was saying, Rav Moshe was the famous question for Rav Moshe about whether you can go on a subway at rush hour in New York. Because obviously you can only like sardines, you can be up against everyone else, so invariably you're up against a woman. So Ramosh says that's not a problem, because the fact is it's not their chiba, it's not their taiva, you're up against women, but you're not thinking, it's like a nurse or a nurse taking a pulse, or a female doctor taking a pulse, or a man taking a pulse. They're not thinking in terms of sexuality. So it's something like that. And Moshe seems to imply, and if you are thinking like that, maybe you better check into yourself a little bit, Okay, so the point is Rabbi Linzer is correct in that regard. But on the same point in time, there are halachas of sneas, which apply to both men and women. And there is an aspect that there's an idea that women are supposed to dress a certain way. So the truth is in Rabbi Linzer's discussion, in Rabbi Linzer's article, what bothered me was the fact that what really is lost is the very concept of sneas. In other words, if you say that it is a man's responsibility, totally, right? Then women can walk around in bikinis. Well, you can't. If you're stimulated, then go close your eyes. Your problem. Obviously, there's a certain point in time where the halacha seems to be saying, "Hey, wait, this is not correct behavior," and the fact that it's somewhat stimulating. Sexually stimulating is part of the issue. On the other hand, there's a certain point in time where you say, well, a woman does not have to go to the extreme of wearing burqas and so forth and so forth. So how do you come to this middle point and so forth? Now the truth is, if you look at again I can refer to Kosher too. If you look at my shurim on sneas, I refer to a point where I call it as is an idea that sneas is perceived to be that there's sexuality and lack of sexuality. I define it as inappropriate sexuality and appropriate sexuality, or permitted sexuality. So there's a certain point in time where the sexuality of a person is permitted al pi the halacha, because that's a natural aspect of their being. Okay, so that develops a more complex understanding of it, where you come to a more developed idea. The fact is that's something that hits me in these type of situations. You see this conflict, and what emerges is a battle back and forth, but what's lost is, okay, so how do you deal with the underlying perceptions here? Okay, and that's really what you're getting at here, in the sense that those women or the community that dresses in a certain way of sneas, they have to know how to respond to the more Haredim when they're arguing, but wait a second, we're still being sexually stimulated. Well, there's a balance here, and you're not really understanding what sneas is about, because obviously sneas does not mean the burqa. Okay, the burqa is really not sneistic. Okay, on a certain level. That develops a more sophisticated perception, and that's really what gets me in many situations. We live in a world where the battle lines are being drawn constantly and consistently, and both sides are defending themselves back and forth, and there's very little contact between the two. Even when they quote the other side, even when they quote the other shita, obviously in the more Haredi world they don't quote the other shita as much, but I know in the more left-leaning world of Orthodoxy do quote the other shitas, but really without the depth of understanding. So what's really the underlying value here that I have to incorporate? And what I find is that you're seeing a lot of divisions that are happening in the Jewish world without any real depth of understanding how the real dynamic between these values are working, and so forth. And what's occurring is a certain entrenchment in all the different sides. And you see it throughout, and you see certain people, in the Haredi world, they have big Talmidei Chacham quoting this viewpoint, and Dati Leumi quoting this side, and so forth. But the fact is you don't see the challenge back and forth, and the fact what's really lost is the dynamic and the I don't want to say indecision, but the inherent challenge of a decision that to be made, in the sense that there's a certain point where I've always felt with certain Gedolim in the past, that they hear both sides of the argument, so forth and so forth. They recognize a psak has to be rendered, so they have to give a psak, but they understand with that psak that it's not black and white. It's not black and white in terms of, the psak may be clear cut, but it's very much like we understand that there's going to be negative values that come out of this. Like, for example, the Jewish view to euthanasia. Okay? Jewish view to euthanasia is much more complex than most people think it is. But at the root of it is the idea that we really understand why good people will want to commit euthanasia. We really understand that. We understand that a real Baal Midas and Baal Chesed will feel terrible to say, we know this person's going to die in a few hours, and he's just suffering with tremendous pain, and I can't pull it. And the amount of gvura it takes to say, I'm not going to pull that plug, because even though on the other hand, it's a lot simpler if you're a fundamentalist and say, oh, you're taking God's way, blah, blah, blah. The fact is, if you really understand the battle between the two values and go through it, it creates a very difficult Judaism. It's a Judaism where you begin to understand, there's this viewpoint, there's that viewpoint. I understand. I have to make a decision. I know if I do A, there's going to be this negative consequence. I know if I do B, there's going to be this negative consequence. But what can I do? Obviously God feels that the better consequence of this overrides the negative consequence, but it's not black and white. And so much of our world today, it's all black and white. And it hits me in almost every concept that exists, is that people don't really understand the challenge you're faced with, and the fact that in Psak, you have people basically saying, this is the halacha, but I understand there's a negative consequence. I understand there's a problem with it. That's one issue. The other thing also hits me today is that the Rav's sister, Mrs. Mazelman, the mother of Moshe Mazelman, the Rav's sister, wrote a book called I think it's called The Soloveitchik Heritage. And it's a book about the Soloveitchik family, basically about her mother and father. And it's a very fascinating work. It seems that the Rav's mother's father, Professor Feinstein, I think the name was Feinstein, big Talmidei Chacham, but very much a person who was worldly. Okay, the Rav's mother used to read Tolstoy, and the Rav remembers read Tolstoy as a young kid, and so forth and so forth. She's a very worldly educated person. And at the Feinstein table on Shabbos, they'd have discussions that involved literature and stuff like that. Okay, I mean, very worldly thought. And Rav Feinstein took a very adamant position. There was a big machlokas over Volozhin. Volozhin was the yeshiva of Lithuania. It was like the Lakewood of Lithuania. It was the big yeshiva of Lithuania. Rosh Yeshiva was in the Tziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, big Talmidei. And the Russians, who was in Russia at the time, Russians wanted them to introduce secular studies. Now, what secular studies they wanted to do at the time was they just wanted to introduce Russian and math. Okay, and it was a big machlokas. Gedolim throughout Europe went back and forth. Rav Feinstein took a position, yes, we should introduce secular studies. The Aruch HaShulchan took a position, yes, we should introduce secular studies. Our rabbis have to know how to talk Russian, because to be an official rabbi in the Russian government, you have to know how to converse in Russian. He said, listen, it's very important for our rabbis to be doing. So there were a lot of Gedolim who said, yes, introduce secular studies into Volozhin. There were other big rabbis who were very much against introducing secular studies into Volozhin. One example was the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time. I'm not sure which one it was, but one of the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time. And the other one, perhaps the one that's the most famous, was Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, the Rebbe's other grandfather. Okay, so Rav Chaim Soloveitchik's position, no secular studies, which was really the position of risk. No secular studies. Okay, back and forth. Eventually, Volozhin did not have... Volozhin, it's a whole big thing about what it seems the history is Volozhin did introduce secular studies for a couple of years when the Russian government wanted secular studies to be dominant, that they wanted the yeshiva to learn secular studies till 3 in the afternoon. And at that point in time, said, the Steve said, what am I running here? If they can't start learning till 3 in the afternoon, I don't have yeshiva anymore. So then he closed Volozhin. That's not the story you hear in the yeshiva world. The yeshiva world is the Steve said no secular studies Volozhin, period. That doesn't seem to be the correct history. Anyways, Rav Chaim was adamant no secular studies, and Rav Feinstein was adamant for big machlokas. Someone came up with an idea for a shidduch. Came to Rav Feinstein and said, "Hey, got a shidduch for your daughter, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik's son." Okay. Okay, and what do you call it? Story goes as Mrs. Masman relates is that her mother was a little bit of a tomboy and was climbing a tree, and sort of overheard this conversation. You know, obviously in the late teens, overheard this conversation that this guy came and said, I think it was her brother-in-law, we have a shidduch for your daughter, Rav Chaim's son. And the Feinstein said, "Gee, I don't know, because they knew Rav Chaim was a very austere family, none of the secular worldly aspects of it." He said, "I don't know," and so forth. So she overheard this. She went to her parents and said, "Listen, let me pick my own shidduch, let me meet him," and so forth and so forth. And the shidduch was arranged. The meeting was arranged. Rav Chaim came to the city, and they met. And think about this. This big machlokas, Rav Chaim was against secular studies. Rav Feinstein was in favor of secular studies, right? In Volozhin. Big, completely different drachim in Torah. But to sit down at the same table on a Shabbos, right? Mechabed each other totally, right? What? And both were masking to let their children get married. Imagine that? It's a completely different world. Completely different world. And the truth is that's because they understood the argument. It's interesting because Rosh Shimon Schwab from Breuer's, before his history, he was head of Breuer's Kehila. He was also a member of the Motzes Gedolei Torah of Aguda. He was a classic Hirschian. He had a BA in history and he was a classic Hirschian. And he wrote a pamphlet called Elu Ve'elu. These and those, okay? And he basically says, those people who think that Rav Shimshon bar Hirsch adopted his philosophy because of Harad Shah. It's an emergency situation, but he was not. They're wrong. This was the belief of Shimshon bar Hirsch. So forth. And he believed that you need secular studies. In fact, it's quoted that the Vilna Gaon said that for every iota of secular studies that you're missing 10 times as much Torah. Okay, but there was another shita. It said no secular studies. So Shimshon says because they thought that was Xeris Amalth. That was the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They can understand there would be a benefit in knowing a little bit more about secular studies, but Xeris Amalth, not to learn secular studies. So what can you do? But it wasn't like I'm right and they're wrong. It wasn't like this attitude where if you learn secular studies, it's totally irrelevant. It's got to be negative for Torah study. No, maybe there's a value, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu said not. But the fact is, it was a much more sophisticated, understanding, challenging, back and forth ideas. A certain amount of a dynamic of a certain positive insecurity, back and forth. I mean, going back and forth. You sort of sit there and say, "Gee, I understand this, I understand that, I understand. Boy, this is a tough problem." And therefore, a person who makes a decision the other way, I can understand that he's got his arguments. It's a completely different world. Our world is becoming more and more separate. And that does not mean you agree with the other side. It does not mean you validate the other side, but it means you understand. You understand the issues, and really what you understand is the underlying values. And that's really what comes out of Beit Shemesh. Yeah.
Rabbi Bolka's book, The Coming Cataclysm, predicted this 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, you see, the problem with Rabbi Book's book, Becoming Cataclysm, is the fact that we have a tremendous. Oh, thank you. The issue with Rabbi Book's, by the way, he's a lot of what's happening today. He called it 20 years ago. The problem with it is, and it really comes out over here, is you have to deal with the difference between the non-Orthodox, between unity with the non-Orthodox and unity with the Orthodox. Right. And if you notice, for example, with the when they had the whole issue of homosexuality years ago with same-sex marriages, CJN asked a bunch of rabbis what they thought. Not distinguishing Reform, Orthodox, Conservative. And one Reform rabbi said, well, the Orthodox said, we're okay. And then they said, Elu ve'elu. Okay? And the fact is Elu ve'elu is not applicable to Reform Judaism from an Orthodox perspective. Okay? The point is what is the basis of relating to the non-Orthodox? So the fact is the way of relating to the non-Orthodox, the basis is the concept of Tue Jun, right, which Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out quite correctly, that Tue Jun basically says, listen, you really don't know what's going on because you're Tue Jun, therefore we're going to be tolerant towards you. It doesn't mean I respect your opinion. It means I don't think you're really competent to make decisions. So he says, and a lot of Reform rabbis don't like to know that the Orthodox are relating to them because of Tue Jun. I mean, there are a lot of underlying issues involved. And a lot of what's happening is we're ending up trying to defend certain positions and so forth, and it gets back to the issue. So how do you work out relating to the non-Orthodox, which is part of the problem that comes out of here? How do you relate to the non-Orthodox? Based on what? And is it even possible to think in terms of a unity to Klal Yisrael and so forth, across all dimensions and so forth? And this is all part of the issue. I really felt for many years that a lot of the problems that exist in the Jewish world is we're not really willing to ask the right questions and really discuss the real issues because we're always trying to avoid it because we're afraid of the questions. Okay, like with Reform Judaism, it's a real problem because how do you relate across a non-acceptable theology? How do you even define theology in that way? And to tell you, let me just tell you how far you go when you start to really highlight the difficulty of this issue. Take Messianic Judaism, right? Messianic Judaism, more commonly known as Jews for Jesus. So there is a professor from a university in Wales, who I believe is also a Reform rabbi, who has written a book that says that we should accept, under the concept of pluralism, Messianic Jews as part of the Jewish community. Okay? And his argument is, listen, from a pluralistic viewpoint, that we accept Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, Reconstructionist, why not Messianics? Accept the atheists, accept seculars, not Messianics. Why? Okay?
Can I sideline you for a moment?
Yeah.
Shmuley Boteach, his new book, Kosher Jesus, essentially. I just read about this in the Post, and Rav Shochet says, Pasnish, can't do this. He's doing something for Judaism that Messianic Judaism hasn't even got a clue about. He's going to make it worse.
Okay.
Comment?
Well, the truth is, Michael Skoback already commented on his Jews for Judaism position. See, as I speak about these different things, doesn't mean I don't take adamant positions. For example, just another example, Rabbi Steve Greenberg is Mishra from YU and known as the Orthodox gay rabbi. Gay rabbi, Orthodox rabbi, because he has smicha from an Orthodox tradition, but he's not Orthodox. He did a ceremony, he didn't call it a kedushin, a commitment ceremony between two men under a chuppah, both men wearing kittles. There was exchange of rings, and there was a document like Iksuba and stuff like that. He called it a commitment ceremony and so forth and so forth. And there was real issues of how to respond to that. And there were a bunch of rabbis who basically signed a document. I was one of them. It basically said, this is not orthodoxy. And I wrote about this in the Tribune, and actually there was a woman who was involved with gay rights here in Toronto who wrote in Tribune, but the letter wasn't published, which was fine with me. But she basically said, why is Rabbi Hecht bringing it up? We all know the Orthodox don't accept same-sex marriages. My point is that was my issue. The issue is define orthodoxy. Okay, Steve Greenberg can do whatever he wants between him and the Kodesh Baruch Hu. I am not going to judge Steve Greenberg from that perspective of Kodesh Baruch Hu. I don't know what his bechira is and stuff like that. It's not up to me. But in defining it as orthodoxy, it's not orthodox. Okay, and it's very important that you take positions and so forth. In terms of Rabbi Vateich's book, the interesting thing is not out till February 1st, so no one really knows what he says. But
although advanced copies were available for these folks to comment.
Well, the truth is, one of Rabbi Vateich's challenges against Rabbi Sheikhad was you didn't read the book, so how can you comment? But the point is
Supposedly he did.
What?
Supposedly he did.
Well, I don't know. I know that was one of the challenges against him. I'm not really up on all this. I just picked up a little bit about this. The truth is that I was in touch with Rabbi Skobach because Rabbi Vateich quoted Rabbi Skobach, as in his defense against Rabbi Sheikhad. At first I didn't know it was Rabbi Skobach. It was Rabbi Skobach. And I said, okay, who's this guy? I don't know. Then finally it dawned on me that it was Michael, right? It was Rabbi Skobach. So Rabbi Skobach put up a thing on his Jews for Judaism website. Basically, Shmuley, it's your mess. Don't use me to clean it up. And the point is that what it seems is Rabbi Vateich is sort of saying we Jews should reclaim Jesus as a good guy. He's one of us, right? And we should reclaim him and so forth and so forth. There is an issue within Jewish thought of who actually was Jesus and whether he was not. There's a lot of Gemaras seem to indicate that from our perspective he wasn't such a good guy. There are other people who say that no, what the Gemara is referring to is someone else who wasn't that Jesus. In fact, there's Ramban in his disputation with Pablo Cristiani says the person you're talking about, we think he lived 100 years earlier, which seems to imply that maybe who the Gemara is referring to was not the Nazarene. But the point is that there's back and forth issues. There's also back and forth issues concerning Paul. There's at least two positions I know of that said that Paul was sent as on a mission by the Sanhedrin. One shita, one position which I heard for many years was that Paul was sent on a mission by the Sanhedrin to spread the Shem Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the Noachite laws, to the non-Jews. That was one thing. Because the big thing about Paul is he took Christianity from being a Jewish sect out into the world and said we can reach out to the world. Right? There's another position which I heard more recently, supposedly from a Kubal from the 1600s, that says that Paul was sent specifically by the Sanhedrin to get these people out of the Jewish world. In other words, Chazal was very upset about this new sect with this heresy about a dead Messiah, but they were still at the time following mitzvahs and so forth and so forth. And you can pull your own innuendos from what I'm about to say. But the fact is, this group was still doing mitzvahs and so forth and so forth. Chazal was saying, no, this is not good for Klal Yisrael. So they said, we got to get them out of the Jewish community. So they assigned Paul the task of getting them out of the Jewish community and making them part of the Gentile world, so we don't have within Judaism people believing in a dead Messiah. Okay? Okay? And especially as it develops into more of divine aspects and so forth. But the point is there are some people, even Paul could look upon as, there's arguments about across the board. It's an interesting history, but it's an issue for us. But do we have to know who Paul was? No. What happened? It's not so who Jesus, I don't know, Kodesh Baruch Hu knows who he was. Where he is now, that's up to Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's up to me. Right? Is he someone I have to reclaim to learn from his Torah? No. Not in my Torah. Did he happen to quote some things he might have heard in the yeshiva that was good? Fine. I've got here, he learned a little bit in the yeshiva and quoted them to the world. That's fine. that was really the issue. In other words, the argument to Jews is that listen, we don't know who these guys are, so maybe we can't know. We're responding to what exists now and what exists in the last few hundred years and so forth. But what I heard Rabbi Hecht was trying to do is tell Jews we should reclaim Jesus, and that is a lot. But the truth is, I haven't read the book, so I don't know what he's doing. But the truth is, Shmuel B'Teich, in many ways, does exactly takes on positions which actually bother me, because what I was really getting to when I wrote that little blurb when I sent around to everyone was that we live in a world where there's values. There's values out there in the Western world. In the secular world, there's values. I'm not going to negate all the values. There's a place for them, and so forth and so forth. But I think there's a tendency in the Jewish world to sort of say, hey, you got a value? We share that value. So now that we both share that value, let's come and do some ritual. In other words, hey, we both feel the exact same thing. Now, let's do some other things which don't affect it. In other words, where Judaism challenges values, or challenges concepts, those are being sort of deadened. It's like let's say with sexuality. It's like the way that Shmuel B'Teich wrote his book Kosher Sex. Yeah, we all know people like sex, and we all like sex. And hey, listen, you can have sex good as a Jew also. Okay, so now you see you're not going to die your sex. Now you can keep kosher. But it's not like, hey, wait a sec, maybe we have a different value that challenges that value. And maybe those things which you have values about, right, maybe we're going to challenge those values. So the truth is that to me is a very difficult part in the Jewish world today. I don't think we're doing enough to get people to challenge themselves, to look into themselves. Okay? You know, if you're a strong nationalist, we can feed you, we can make you, we can follow a little bit more. The mitzvahs we focus on what I would call ritual, but they're mitzvahs, I don't like using the word ritual, they're mitzvahs but the mitzvahs, the chukim, we can advocate people to do them because we're not really challenging the way someone thinks. Okay? So you're thinking the exact same way as you thought before. Now you're just doing it in a kosher kitchen rather than in a treif kitchen. But almost you're doing the exact same thing. But are we really challenging your lifestyle?
The growth hasn't taken place yet.
Right?
The growth hasn't taken place. There's an outer switch, but the inner hasn't.
But that's happening throughout.
Yes, and I have a real problem with it.
But I don't think it's just happening because it sounds more in the Haredi world or in certain ones, but I think it's also not permeating in a lot of different aspects of the Jewish world. And that's really it, in the sense that from we learn from Torah, there has to be times when you walk away saying, gee, that really challenged me, something that I think is important, that I think is of value. And now I'm hearing something in Torah that says that it challenges my value. I'm going to walk away with questions. And by the way, I think I quoted in that little blurb there, the Ramban. Ramban says never leave learning until you feel that you've learned something new. Like on this, it's shaking you up a little bit. I think learning is supposed to shake you up a little bit. Not shake you up to totally tear you down, but shake you up to make you feel, okay, what's going on? And therefore, the response to Beit Shemesh is, I in no way want to come across in any way of defending what I think is abhorrent behavior. Okay, I think the behavior by these individuals towards this little girl was abhorrent. I think their whole behavior is abhorrent. But I want to say, okay, what's going on here? What is the root that somehow they heard a value that they're misapplying that maybe I should think about? And that really is an issue for them. Okay, and that's what we have to search out. What really is that issue? And I think that there are a lot of there's you have machlokas about things and disagreements and so forth, but you have to see what's going on. And one of the issues really is the definition of a Jewish state that I think is really at the core here, and in a simplistic way. It's not it's a fact of what really is the essence of the value structure upon which the state is to be built upon. And that gets down to an issue of what is the Jewish people. Okay, and that's the article I handed out to you tonight, an article called National Identity, which is not yet on our website, but this article, which basically presents the issue of what really is the Jewish people. Okay, and it gets into the issue of what are we in terms of religion and a people. Okay, let me give you an example of an issue. I've heard people argue that for the sake of Jewish unity, the religious have to be a little bit more tolerant. And they say, wait a second. A person says, we're all Jews, and so, we're all Jews, and therefore we have to be tolerant of each other, and for the sake of Jewish unity, we have to adopt a tolerant viewpoint, and so forth. The problem with that definition is what exactly is the whole point of the Jewish people. The point of the Jewish people is to accomplish a certain aspect or mission or idea of the world. Then if Jewish unity is at the expense of that mission, it becomes a real issue. And this is something people don't recognize, that one of the most adamant anti-Zionists that lived was there were a few, but one of the strongest anti-Zionist positions was from the Breuer's community, the Shimshon Hirsch. When the Aguda was founded, the Aguda was trying to get different groups involved. When they approached the Hirschian, the Frankfurt community, they said, fine, but on one condition. You can have nothing to do with the non-Orthodox. Okay, so the Mizrahi position to relate to the non-Orthodox, everyone thinks it was the Polish Hasidim who were very much against relating to non-Orthodox. It turns out that the real adamant position taken against the non-Orthodox position of Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch. Shimshon Hirsch would have nothing to do with the non-Orthodox. Now, if you think about this, he is also the father of Kirov. He's the father of Torim Derech Eretz. If you think in terms of non-Orthodox, he was the most adamant about having nothing to do with the non-Orthodox. The fact is the way I understand it saying, he says, yes, there's a Jewish people, but the essence of what we are is Torah. The Torah is the essence. Torah created the Jewish people for a purpose. Okay? Without that purpose, what is the necessity of the Jewish people? So therefore, a Jewish peoplehood without Torah was irrelevant to him, was negative to him. Okay? So saying you're going to create a Jewish state without any Torah was a farce. That's not a Jewish state. That was the Adam position of Shimshon Hirsch. Okay, and that's where Aguda was coming from. Right. On the opposite side was the Raya Kook. The Raya Kook took a very different position about Klal Yisrael. His argument was there were two bris with Klal Yisrael. Two unique ways of defining Jewish people. One is what he called Bris Avos, the other was called Brit Sinai. But Bris Avos was inherent in their being. The Jewish people were unique because they were created, they are the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and they're inherently different and inherently unique. And there's a value just to their inherent Jewishness. Okay? Now, obviously, we want to take it back to Torah and so forth, but the fact is just, therefore, a Jewish state, even not all Torah, still has some type of value. Okay? And that's the Raya Kook's position. But it's a big machlokas between them. And you have sources one way, sources the other way. And Rav Hershel Schachter quotes the fact that there was still Yisrael, the kingdom of Israel, even though it was under Al Rishayim, as Malachim, it was still a government of a Jewish government. It still had value as a Jewish government, even though it wasn't Al Pi Torah. Menashe was still a Melech Yisrael. His government was a Jewish government, even without Torah. Yeah.
Would you not say that the mere survival of the Jewish people through the ages was precisely because of its intolerance of practice that was not, I'll put orthodox in quotes, okay? Because obviously there's a stretch of that. But what I'm trying to explain is that within certain boundaries alone, Judaism survived, with or without the state of Israel, but only precisely because those intolerant boundaries were there.
But what's interesting is that it's interesting. What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, this is the issue.
Because some people say that more than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat kept the Jewish people. I find that statement to be problematic, because it seems to imply the real value is maintaining the Jewish people, and the religion serves to maintain the Jewish people, which was why Golda Meir said, in the Galus it's important that people keep Shabbos, but in Israel it no longer matters. Because the principal idea is to keep the Jewish people, and then Shabbos serves that purpose. No. It's the other way around. The real purpose is to bring Shabbos into the world. The Jewish people were the people who brought down Shabbos. Now the truth is when you take it one step further, see, a lot of complexity in our world is missing because of this. The fact is that what really is unique is that you have a nation that existed for 2,000 years without a land. Okay? So the question is, and that's really the problem that exists today. This philosopher I quoted before, Zizek, he himself is an interesting figure. He's not a fan of Israel's, although he loves going there. And people ask him how come he goes to visit so many times to Israel when they know that he's not such a big fan of Israel. But his argument is very simple. He says, what is this argument? 2,000 years you've been out of the country, now you come back and say it's our land? There's inhabitants there already. You can't just come and say, hey, it's our land, goodbye inhabitants. Right? If you look at it from a secular perspective, a lot of people don't recognize that. We're talking about a phenomena that is absolutely unique. A nation. It's not a conquest. What's being happened now is a desire to compare what's the Zionists to European colonialists. That was really the essence of the apartheid claim. A lot of people miss the whole point of the apartheid claim. The apartheid claim had nothing to do with an argument that the whites oppressed blacks. That was just to get the point. But the real essence of it was European colonialists came onto the land and subjugated the inhabitants of the land. Okay, in a certain way, that was the comparison that you had people from Europe coming around subjugating the inhabitants of the land. The defense of the Jews is we're not people from Europe, we had to be in Europe, but it's our land. We were a nation there, and we were kicked out by the Romans. The fact is I've seen people write about that. I just saw a person make that statement. I think Gingrich also made that statement, but I saw a person from the 1890s, make this statement in America. A founder of some Christian and Jewish group, and he argues that this nation is returning back to its land. But the problem is, the nation is returning back to its land that was fallow, and basically saying, "Hey, there's inhabitants on the land." So think about this in terms of just your property. I mean, the point is if someone's lived on the land for X amount of years, then the people come back and say, "Sorry, it's our land." Well, in law, there's a concept of squatting, and the fact is, if you haven't complained for X amount of years, it's over. Well, we're saying we did complain. Our argument is not that we couldn't complain because we're held against our will over in that, but we wanted to come back. So the point is, it's a very complex issue that no one wants to deal with. You have a nation returning to a land where there were inhabitants that now occupied the land, and they're saying, "Hey, we can leave." So that's the type of issue. But the reason we don't go into that is because we're constantly not dealing with all the real issues that are going on. What is our nationhood? Where does our nationhood come from? Our religion distinguished our nationhood. So what does that say about the value of our religion within our nationhood? So Rosh Hashanah's position is it's the Torah that created Klal Yisrael. The Torah defined Klal Yisrael, right? You're right. It's not a normal nation was created by any other nation. Every other nation was created from the land. How were nations created? You had a land, and nations developed around the land. Here we are. A nation came and said, "Listen, Kosh Baruch Hu basically gave us this nation and said, okay, you're a special nation. This is your job. Now, after I created the nation." It's a remarkable thing in terms of Klal Yisrael. We were created as a nation and then given the land, which means we have to have a definition of ourselves as nation. Okay, so the point is that then if you turn around and say, okay, religion is what defines our nation, the Torah defines our nation, then a nation without Torah is irrelevant. But you see, that was the Machlokes Raya Cook and Shlomo Hirsch. These are powerful arguments if you really understand the depth of it. people are yelling back and forth and so forth, and without really understanding the depth of the arguments and the challenge that faces us. It's like, and what's happening in Beit Shemesh is, and it's so hard to speak about this because there's no way to be understood that in any way I accept that abhorrent behavior, but people are just not getting the point. Here are people who are basically saying, we want to be Jewish. Whether we agree with their form of Jewishness or not, that's something else. We want to be Jewish, and we have no tolerance for people who don't want to be Jewish. Now the truth is that perception is not the way out. The Rambam in his Ikarim, right, in his Ikarim, the Rambam writes at the end of Ikarim, he says you have to write in your Gimel Ikarim, he says, okay, if a person believes in the Ikarim but does sins, he's a chotem. Okay, he's still part of Klal Yisrael. But he says a person who doesn't believe in the Ikarim, mitzvah l'sona, you're commanded to hate him. Okay, you're commanded to hate him. There's no sense. Now you look at it. Now you Gimel Ikarim. I think if you go, it's very hard to see non-Orthodox people buying the Gimel Ikarim. But the Rambam then goes on to say in the Yad that the whole concept of NISHMA, that if they don't believe in it because they weren't brought up a certain way, then you should still treat them with love and so forth and so forth. But the bottom line statement is that Jewish unity is subjected to an acceptance of a certain value system. And if a person doesn't share the underlying pinnings of that value system, then maybe Jewish unity is not so important. On the other hand, you have this the idea of Tue Jun, where you had a disagreement among the Karaites. In the Sephardim treated Karaites quite friendly, based upon the Rambam's position, and Rabbi, who basically outreached the Karaites and so forth. In the Crimea, where Karaites were also found, right, the Ashkenazi community was very intolerant to the Karaites. The Ramah's decision was that Karaites all had a din of mamzerim, therefore don't even bother outreaching to them because they can't marry into Klal Yisrael anyways. So, and it got to a point when the Nazis came into the Crimea, they saw this other group there that weren't really Jewish but acting differently. So they asked the Jews, what are they? They're Karaites, they're not Jews. Okay? So the fact is the Nazis left the Karaites alone. Now, it might be the Jews did the Karaites a favors and said, why call them Jews? They'll just get killed by the Nazis, so we'll say they're not Jews. But the fact is that, and the law of return in Israel, Karaites are included in the law of return in Israel. Right? And there's a few Karaite communities now, I think, out in California or where else. Right? But the point is that, okay, I think in Israel, okay, but anyways, but the fact is we're living, we talk about Jewish unity, and we don't understand the challenges of Jewish unity, right? What exactly is this Jewishness? And how do you take stand? So when I see these people taking a stand, obviously I disagree with their definition of Jewishness, but then I have to come up with a definition of what I'm disagreeing with. I have a Jewish Tribune article coming out today, and I basically argue that one of the problems that I have with Haredim is, of course it's wrong to say all Haredim have this attitude and so forth, but Haredim who try to say, listen, not all Haredim and so forth, the fact that these guys can come up with this kind of message from your educational systems, you have better looked into yourself and say what's wrong with our educational systems if we can have this kind of problem. But on the other hand, I also saw in the Torah Beck's article where she said that there was people yelling, no, we want Beit Shemesh to be okay. We want malls and theaters and so forth. And it seems to be that this statement was, I first saw it, I thought it was made by the Chilonim. Then my wife pointed out to me that in the caption over there, in one of the pictures, this is one of the calls of the Dati Leumi high school. They said, that's their battle cry? I should be happy with the battle cry of
look into yourselves again.
Yeah, look into yourselves. The point is that the issue here. The fact is what I find is that the Haredim are arguing for what they think is Torah. I think their Torah is problematic, but I understand that what they're arguing for is a statement of what they think Torah is. Now our question is let's try and figure out what's problematic with their Torah. Let's try and understand the Torah, but let's try and understand and then there's also issues in terms of how do we understand as a Torah community of how to relate to the non-religious in Israel, because that's a necessity. I mean, the fact is that I just quoted a fascinating Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer, in one of my insights, I just quoted a fascinating Chasam Sofer, that Moshe Rabbeinu, by the fourth Makkah, at the end of the fourth Makkah, Pharaoh says, you can leave, you go be Makriv, but what do you have to leave Egypt for? Go Makriv in your land and go, you don't have to leave. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, it's not right. It's not right for us to kill your sheep, your gods right in front of you. It's not nice. It's not nice.
He's looking out for number one. They're going to kill us if they kill
wait a second. That was the second position.
Yeah.
Not only that, they might attack us. But the Chasam Sofer says his first response was Miderech Musar. It's not right to go sacrifice your gods right in front of them. Now, you look at this, what are you saying? I looked over the Chasam Sofer, as other people read the Chasam Sofer and say, maybe I'm reading it wrong. Chasam Sofer seems to say it's a musa, it was a midah. You don't go mock another person's religion right in front of their face. Well, wait a second, by the 10th Makkah, before Makkah's Bechoros, they do. They basically, Kodesh Baruch Hu tell them to take their sheep and for 4 days, basically in your face, we're going to kill your sheep right in front of you. Ain't going to be nothing you can do about it, right? It's like that famous line in Billy Jack. You ever saw the movie Billy Jack? I'm going to put my foot on your left cheek, right? And it's a movie with this guy. It's surrounded by a bunch of thugs, and he says to the bad guy, he says, I'm going to put my right foot against your left cheek. He's like a martial artist, and says, and I know you got all these thugs around you, but right now, ain't going to be nothing in this world that's going to prevent me from doing that. He does that, then he gets beaten up. But the fact is aside from that, the point of that is the Jewish people basically took the sheep and said, we're taking the sheep, we're killing it, ain't going to be nothing in this world that's going to prevent us from doing it, and you guys are just going to sit by and smile. So we did mock them. We clearly mocked them. But the Chasam Sofer says by the fourth Makkah, Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, we can't do that. And the fact is, at that point in time, the way you understand it, is that where they were at that point in time, in dealing with their beliefs at that point in time, they had doubts, they had questions, they had this, but they still had these. You have to treat them with certain understanding of where they're coming from. So the fact is we have to understand these perspectives. So there's a lot of reasons why you can disagree. I disagree with the concept of sneas. I disagree with the concept of women. I disagree with a lot of aspects. So one of the problems of sneas is the fact that sneas has to be balanced against the right of any human being for self-expression and for self-development. So sneas, and you see this in the Arab world, cannot be an excuse to not allow another human being to develop. And that's also a chiyuv al pi Torah. So the point is there's a lot of, because the Torah really, when it comes down to fundamentally, most people want to think in black and white. Most people want to think there's a good drive and a bad drive. Torah basically throws us thousands of drives and saying, okay, all these drives are good, you create how to prioritize them and create the panel for them. But don't think it's so simple. Because when you prioritize this value, you're going to have to, this value. Imagine, yeah.
Why is self-expression a chiyuv al pi Torah? From where do we learn that?
Okay, because you can argue it from the argument that of Adam and Chava. That Adam and Chava had a possession, had an argument to develop. To shomer es a gun, to protect the gun, but they also had an argument becoming a tzelem Elokim, pruvu milu et haaretz v'kivshuha, and develop dominion over the world. You might want to say it was only on the man because pruvu was only a man, but the fact is it was stated to both of them, and both of them had an obligation, have a personal obligation to try and reach for the ability to emulate God as a prime directive upon the human being.
So why is that through self-expression as opposed to being perfect in our observance of mitzvot?
Okay, so the fact is there's two aspects to this development, and this perhaps is the great dichotomy of human existence. Most people, mitzvot is a concept of tzivui, of following the orders of God. That's an aspect of being an Eved Hashem, of following God. The idea of being a tzelem Elokim necessitates you becoming a decision maker. Elokim is a judge. Tzelem Elokim means you as a decision maker. So Kodesh Baruch Hu, in telling you to follow tzelem Elokim, is telling you have to, if you want to emulate God, there's a lot of questions about Matei Yodea and so forth and so forth. It's a matter of truly emulating God means to have a certain sense of strength and the ability to make your own decisions. The Gedolim of when I was in Yeshiva, Gedolim, right? There's such personalities. The Rav, the Chutner, the Moshe, remarkable personalities with tremendous strength over our color. I mean, the fact is, these people had tremendous personality. Rav Price, if you ever met Rav Price here in Toronto, he wasn't a wallflower. Very much not like the wallflower. He had his opinion. You know what I mean? And the fact is that very much comes from the strength of Torah. And the point is that in many ways, Torah is an aspect of own self-expression. I mean, Ramosha says, interesting, Ramosha talks about how there's a machlokism. He says machlokism are inherent. It's not possible for all human beings to have the same opinion. Because we're all different. We're all different personalities. And we have an aspect of self-expression. So the fact is, women, I believe, also have their self-expression. You want to say kivshua, doesn't apply to them, but the fact is that Purvu is a bracha, there's a whole issue on that, but the point is women also have to find their own self-expression. Okay, and then that has to be done within the confines of Torah. That's the challenge. And that's our constant back and forth.
So Kivshuha may, then you feel, refers to the interface between the person's own personality meeting the experiences that they have in the world and manipulating them in the service of God.
In a certain way. I think Kivshua means it's more
like
external.
Manipulating.
Yeah, but more external aspect of looking in the world. The fact is that if you look at real submissiveness, people go off to a monastery, so forth and so forth. It's very much in terms of sexuality as well. If you look in terms of submissiveness, it's usually tied to celibacy and so forth and so forth. The fact is the sexuality is very much a person out there in the world, right? Very much, because sexuality is an aspect of personality. If you read Freud's perception of sexuality, as he puts it, it's not totally tied to the productive system. Read one of Freud's book down, but it's an aspect of self, desire, and so forth and so forth. The fact is that energy is extremely important if you're going to go out there and do something in the world. Mm-hmm. A wallflower cannot do something in the world. You have to have strength.
You have to have passion.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So the fact is there's a lot. If you really look at Torah in its depth, it's to me, I think it's extremely mind-boggling in terms of how we put together these various different values and come up with some type of wholeness and trying to balance these values and knowing full well that as we try to create these values and try to structure them, we got, okay, this, if we put this over this value, will this be lost, but how can we compensate for that, and so forth. It's a tremendous challenging perspective, and it's not simple. Yeah.
So now to relate to another Rav of that door, Rav Gedalia Felder, Alav Shalom.
Yes.
There's a story that I've always admired about him. I knew him. I knew him in his health briefly, and unfortunately in his illness. But I knew of him more through this story, and essentially it was his relating to the issue of tzniut, that if a woman came to him and unknowingly presented a hand to shake, he would take the hand and not embarrass, because that was the higher value. And he knew what tzniut was. He could define and make the decision. And also he was known as Mekel in the sense of bringing people closer to practice.
There's as you mentioned, I think my position is very similar to the same. If a woman puts out her hand, I will shake her hand. But it's interesting because there's a lot of issues going on. For example, my son's married. I had never hugged my daughter-in-law. It's just but my wife did hug my father. I mean, a completely different world, you know, and there's different shitas like this, you know, like in the Hershey community, you know, sisters, cousins kissed. I mean, it's well known. I mean, he says it by Yaakov Avinu. He says the reason Yaakov Avinu kissed Rachel because cousins kiss, you know, where he basically saying don't think it was a romantic kiss and so forth. Okay, that was his argument there. But the point is, there's a lot of different shitas in this and so forth and so forth. The thing that's interesting about it is look the other way.
The knowledge of the shita too.
Right, but the fascinating thing is that perhaps the strongest position against it, against shaking hands, is Ramosha. Ramosha is the one who comes out and says, don't do it. And he says, but to Miloimet Schus, for people who do it, this might be their argument. But he says, I still disagree with the argument. So the truth is that you have to know both sides. So you have to know that it goes both ways and so forth and so forth. The problem is to know, the issue to me is to know if you're going to be in that situation where you can embarrass someone, well, how are you going to get out of that embarrassment? And maybe you shouldn't be in that situation. Like when I hear situations of a person who's in a situation and he ends up saying, "Oh no, I can't do it," and ends up embarrassing people, I tend to say, "Why did you put yourself in that situation in the first place?" Okay, you know, I mean, the fact is, it's a matter of looking at things and working through. We are called upon to follow certain halachas that the world will look upon as kind of strange, and then we have to figure out, okay. It's not. Sometimes we think in your face, like, "Wow, we're keeping from," and people say, "Whoa, the people really love that and will love you for it." The fact is that's not true. They look at you like you're crazy. You know, a lot of times I find with myself, I know that I've said this to my kids, is that there are times where it seems I'm a little bit sheepish about saying that I'm from, or that I'm religious, or something like that. But it's why? Because I know that the person I'm talking to, by saying I'm religious, will put me in the same category with fundamentalists. And I don't want to be seen as a fundamentalist. Right? You know, thinking that I think like a Christian fundamentalist is an embarrassment for me. So I may try and avoid the fact of in your face from, because you won't even know what I'm talking about by saying I'm from. So what's the point of making that an issue? A lot of times it's subtle. I mean, the point is that if you really understand the issue, then someone like Gedai held one way, Ramosha held another way. But I'm sure that Ramosha would understand and not put himself in a situation that would be similar. I mean, there's another story where Ramosha, just to tell you how he was the same way, is that it's a remarkable story. There was a woman who Moshe knew Russian. There was a woman in the Lower East Side who had a sister in Russia, used to write a letter in Russian, and she didn't know how, and she couldn't read it. So she used to go up to the yeshiva every, she used to get these letters like every few weeks, and go, and she found out that Moshe could read the letter. So she asked, "Excuse me, Rabbi, you read the letter." So here's this little old lady, not from Jewish, but not from, but and goes in because Ramosha letter, and Ramosha says read the letter, so forth and so forth. Anyways, one time, I forget the exact details, this woman comes and like, "Where's the rabbi? I have to find the rabbi," right? And like, who's this lady? Look at her Ramosha, right? Like in everyone's mind, you're talking about Ramosha, the God of the door. I mean, this lady, I have to meet the rabbi, just the rabbi, right? Okay, and like they're saying, well, wait a second, you have to wait a few minutes. So Ramosha comes, sometimes she sees Ramosha, and Ramosha says, "Of course, come in right away," and reads and translates the letter for her, and so forth and so forth. Gives the letter, and everyone's looking like, what the heck is going on here? I mean, like, this little old lady comes in and so after all, which she has no idea who this is. She has no idea about like some of the stature of what's going on over here. "Thank you very much, sir. Very, very nice." She's walking away like, "Thank you very much." And then she says, "You understand? She has one sister. She writes in Russian. Haven't been together for years. She can't read the Russian, right? What kind of type it is to read this letter to her? It's like, if she ever shows up, of course she'd send it right into me,
What
it's like, right, but he's not thinking in terms of just being a match, right? Just being a match. I mean, the fact is that the perceptions of people in terms of how you relate and how you don't relate, and the fact is that the subtleties of this, what hits me in Beit Shemesh is the fact that on both sides there's no perception of relationship. I understand these people are saying, hey, we want a Jewish world. I understand that. They want a Jewish world. They have a narrow definition of the Jewish world, but they want a Jewish world. And they're fighting a battle against Chilonim, against a whole different world. And it's a battle, but the problem is there's no. I'll tell you the real problem. The problem is there's no subtlety, and the problem is there's no questioning. My person who works with me, Martin Abels, just came back from Sfat. He was joking around, He said, that there should be a new, West Side Story. He just came back from Sfat. They said maybe a new play, West Bank Story, between the Breslovers and the Lubavitchers in Sfat, going back and forth. He says, and all over Sfat, you have the Breslovers running na na na, and the Lubavitchers running Yechi Adonenu, and they went back and forth, making like a new West Side Story, right? And he says, and one time you saw on the Lubavitch building, you saw the starting of na na na. We'll say the guy got chased away. I'm looking at this and I'm hearing this. These guys. My biggest issue I always have with Mashiachas is that you think you can make a decision? You're walking around saying, I believe in A. Who are you to believe in anything? You have an opinion? Yeah, you have an opinion. It sounds like a great Jesus concept. I believe. Right? I'm a total idiot, but I can believe it. And if you're a Torah Jew, you don't just say, I believe. What's your arguments? What did the Torah say about this? What does the Torah say about this? What, I believe because I believe. And it's like unbelievable. And a lot of these people, Mashiach would say, I was talking to somebody, a guy was talking with him as Mashiachas. Can he learn it all? No. Oh, but he's Mashiachas. He can take a position that the Rebbe was a Mashiach, right? Excuse me, what book is that again? That's a Talmud. Oh, is that? You have an opinion? I mean, it's remarkable in our world today. And people walk around with it. And the truth is that, and then in terms of a lot of things, we care if people go places, and it's like we're trying to get them to keep kosher, but to really challenge them and say, did you think? I'm not gonna. Don't be so comfortable here. Maybe I'm saying something that's challenge you. Maybe you should walk away saying, gee, I don't like what the rabbi said. Maybe I have to go home and think about it. Because maybe Torah should be a little bit of mussar, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of conflict. This thing, the Chasam Sofer statement about how we see later on that Kodesh Baruch Hu said, mock the Egyptians, and over here Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't want to mock them. It's obviously a balancing act. How do you deal with the non-religious? How do you deal with other religions? Face on your face. How do you do it? Did it go by? I mean, it's so complex, and Torah really reflects that complexity, and that's missing. Anyway, so my thing about Shemesh is I just feel that no one's really looking at themselves, and no one really, on the other hand, is really trying to figure out what exactly is going on the other side. What's really the value underlying a lot of their Nourishkeit, if you want to say it's Nourishkeit, and then try and take it from there with an idea of saying, I'm not trying to defend myself, I'm trying to get to the real goal.
Is that the consequence of Tshuva? That if we are charged with the mission of being intellectual decision makers, that we are called upon therefore to decide. Many people decide with incomplete information.
Right, and that's the problem. And the fact is sometimes we're called upon to make decisions with incomplete information, but the truth is that we should only do so when we have to. I've heard this B'Shem Rav Yaakov Weinberg twice from two different sources. Rav Yaakov Weinberg said you should always try and put off a decision to the last possible moment. Why? Because why should the tzaddik that you are today be bound by the Amaretz you were yesterday? Okay? In other words, now, obviously, the last possible moment to make a decision doesn't mean the last possible moment. The last possible moment where it's okay to make the decision. But you have to know when, you have to recognize that, wait a second. Do I really have all the information? Do I really know the facts? Now, obviously, you don't want to put it off so you lose the things, but you have to really balance these things out.
And one of your points, though, is that we can never really have complete information. That we can, even if we research, even if we try and see a balanced side.
That
There are
is-
arguments we're missing, there are viewpoints we're missing, and we are still making
Command,
decisions.
that's absolutely,
still have to make the
because we
decision.
have to. That's the challenge of this world. That's the challenge of this world. We are called upon to make decisions with insufficient information. That's the tzibah that Baruch Hu has given us, and we have to do that. Okay?
And
we have
live
to-
with the consequences.
Right. But the fact is that you try and make decisions the best you can. That really, you see, it's really a reflection of one of the problems with the Das Torah concept. Whenever I thought of Gedolim in the past, to me it wasn't, actually Larry Kaplan from McGill University wrote an article about this, about the new view of Das Torah. Now Das Torah is the belief that these rabbis have some type of special conduit to God. So they have this like Ruach HaKodesh. But when I was younger, Das Torah meant the guy was a genius. I remember one time a woman asked me a question about hair covering. And because of my wife's shita that we practice, which I have for her yeshiva that I was in, and so forth, is my wife doesn't cover her hair in the house. Right? She always wears a hat when she goes outside the house, and that's a shita that Rosh Yeshiva mine followed. And other, so, anyways, for some reason that was the shita we adopted when we got married, for whatever reasons. Years later, another woman came over and asked me about this, and so forth and so forth. And she said, "Yeah, and I also heard Ramosha held to that shita." I said, "Ramosha did not hold to that shita." Okay, and I pulled out Ramosha and I showed him the spectrum of opinions Ramosha held of, and that was not one of those. That was not one of the positions Ramosha held. So when said to me, she says, "Well, what should I do? You do this, and you see Ramosha." I said, "Oh, what should you do? You have Benji Hecht saying blank, blank, blank. And you have the Paisek Hador, Ramosha Feinstein, saying this and this and this. What do you think you should do?" Right? The woman followed Ramosha, which was decided out. The truth is, the question is, so why don't I? Okay, so that's a question I have to answer to myself, and I know how it came about, and so forth and so forth. But the point is that there's a difference when you turn to Gedolim and say, "Listen, I don't know everything, but I have to make decisions and think." So that does not mean I'm going to buy something from someone who basically tells me, something that I totally can't understand. But the fact is, you have to balance using your mind.
And what if she would have held by you?
What? And the truth is that there is someone who holds by me, but the fact is she'll ask me all those shalos. The truth is that if you ask me your shalos and accept my churmas as well as my kulas, then I'm your posek. That's fine.
Right.
I have no problems with that. Okay. And that there are people who basically ask me shalos and so forth and so forth. But I cannot take it when someone comes up and says, ask me this shala A, knowing full well that I'm makel in it, and
right.
And doesn't ask me shala B.
Fine.
Right. Okay. So the fact is that's fine. But if you're looking to hear different opinions, then I'm not in the same category of Ramosha. There's no doubt about that. It's ridiculous. But the point is that. But in terms of choosing your Rav, again, you don't choose the Gadol Ador. You choose someone that you're related to, because there's more because there's an aspect of knowing who you are as well. Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to the Shemesh. I mean, certainly part of it's sort of respect for the arguments and opinions of others. I'm wondering if another aspect is simply respect for other Jews as Jews and human beings, as being something more than just an abstract argument. I mean, for these people who call themselves Sikarim to spit at a girl, to me it means that they didn't see her as a little girl. They just saw her as representing a threat of some sort.
Right, and that's the balance over here.
It's a construct threat.
Right.
That's just
yeah,
it.
I'm not. That's what I'm saying. I think that all I'm trying to do is look at what's going on over there, and they're basically saying, listen, it's not even defending their own religious viewpoints. It's the idea that a Jewish state should be Jewish. What does Jewish mean? Okay, and they say, so they have a very narrow definition of what Jewish is, but something that we all have to think about is a Jewish state basically a democratic state. That's the other side of the coin. That's a problem also. But the fact is you're right. at that point in time, you have to look at a person as a person or as representative of a class or whatever. They see this little girl walking there and representative of this whole group. She's just a person, and that should be seen as well. And that's lost out because of their
Israel and the
just any
humanity.
But
by the way, Sarah Chaim can apply to human beings.
Yeah,
okay.
Why shouldn't it?
Right.
Well, you're looking at the not the youngest, but the younger and weaker portion of, and that is who they chose to attack. Even if she represented this concept to them.
Right,
I understand what you've explained.
But the fact is that
there's
in
a viewpoint.
You see, I don't want to get into defending them because obviously I'm not defending them.
Clearly.
But if you, a lot of times when you see people take on stands, they lose sight of the individual. You look at this Occupy whatever, right? Who Occupy Oakland yesterday, supposedly, 100 people got arrested. So they have this stand, and it's their value, and it's the right thing to do.
Do they even know what their value is?
The point is that they couldn't take over this vacant building, so they went into a YMCA or YWCA, whatever it is, right? They went in there, and the people who were there were totally irrelevant to them. The people came in there just to do their working out and so forth and so forth. All of a sudden, these people, all passionate about their position, coming in there, so forth. Individuals, human beings, irrelevant. We have an ideal. We're fighting for an ideal. The truth is idealism can make you lose sight of human beings. So the point is that you have to see this, but you have to go right to the root and say, wait a second. Okay, I understand. Even if I agreed with your position, right, this is not the way to go about doing it. Now, I also disagree with your position. What's interesting is watching a situation where you see someone doing something who you happen to agree with their position, but their methodology is wrong. And watch your emotions when they're arguing for something you agree with. You'll start saying, well, I understand their passion, I understand what they're. The truth is that what you're saying is that there's something, is that somehow you see a value in this idealism, overlooking the humanity aspect of it. And that's why when you don't agree with that person's idealism, for sure you don't agree with their methodology. But that's something that like I find that I become sensitive to the fact that even when people are standing for positions that I agree with, but they're so overtaken by their idealism that they lose sight of the individuals involved. And by the way, I go back to the Chasam Sofer. What a remarkable statement. The Chasam Sofer, the way he sends Moshe Rabbeinu. Here you are in the battle of showing that God is right. God exists. God is right. And you're saying, listen, at this point in time, I don't think it's right to make my point by in your face. Right? We're going to do it through this way, but not in your face right now. And then a lot of times I find where people present arguments saying, something, you're 100% right. Just this was not the time to do it this way. So it's a lot more. And I find myself in that situation. It sounds like I'm supporting a position which I don't believe in. But the point is that you want to say you get so caught up in this idealism, so caught up in the battle of Torah and so forth and so forth. You lose sight. Not only that, at that point in time, you think this girl is being misled, and then she's already adopted this rishus and stuff like that. I mean, people do it all the time. I mean, that's why I get very, very upset. Give an example. I get very, very upset with the way that some Jews respond to Arabs. I'm very, very upset with this. There was there was a woman at Sobeys. There was an Arab woman who worked, a Muslim woman who worked at Sobeys, and it was a Friday, and it was Ramadan, right? And I saw it wasn't busy there, and I saw her sort of like, leaning against the thing over there, and and obviously, Ramadan's not easy, I went over to her and I said, yeah, I'm sure you're not feeling so great. Well, hope you feel better. So, and the woman looked at me like, wow. Yeah, why? And the truth is, I spoke to my Rabbi about this once. I mean, if you really think about this, Muslims, they believe in God. I mean, they believe in one God. So there's issues with they believe in Muhammad, whatever it is, but they believe in one God. And this person is doing Ramadan for some reason. This person is doing Moishe Nefesh because they believe that God, the one God, told them to do this. Now it's wrong, but on the other hand, so I'm looking and saying, wait a second. So I looked at this woman, and she really appreciated it. And sit there, I mean. I'm sure it must be difficult for her as a Muslim woman to be a checkout person at what?
At Sobeys.
At Sobeys, right? And
she needs a job just like others need a job.
Right, and from her religious perspective, right? She has her nationalism. She has her feelings, right?
Sure.
It's like Americana once said. It's interesting. Americano once said, he said, it's disrespectful to the Arabs to treat them the way we think they'll just be okay to be second-class citizens in our country. That's disrespectful to them. And everyone got upset when Ehud Barak said, if I was born a Palestinian, I'd be a member of a Fatah as well. Because if you're a very strong nationalist, you'll be nationalist which way or whatever. But the fact is that's what's so strange when you see great generals. Enemy generals get together and they both become friends because they're both real nationalists. I'm a nationalist. I mean, it's very confusing.
But that's analogous to the Gedolei Hador who sit there and may have very vehement differences,
diametrically
in
opposed
terms of opinion, but they respect the Torah in the other.
Right.
Same with political adversaries who, after the fight, they get together. Like the classic moment where just at Obama's speech, where the lady who got shot in the head,
Gabrielle Giffords
was there, and it was her opponent who helped her up, who sat beside her and helped her up.
There's an interesting thing that they say. Who is it that in terms of two gedolim who fight over a thing, but what is their common bond? Because I'm trying to find the Ratzon Hashem, and you're trying to do the Ratzon Hashem. So really, we're connected because we both share and want to do the Ratzon Hashem. We just have to disagree a little bit what it is. But we're both. But
it's still a singular purpose.
Right. Exactly. And that's really it. That's really it. And that's where it starts. But at the same point in time, that's where you start getting into issues in terms of dealing with the non-Orthodox one, because the fact is it's not the Ratzon Hashem. So Theodore Herzl's. What he did, and I'm not trying to judge him on that, is that his goal was not to fulfill the Ratzon Hashem. So in a certain way, I'm closer to the Satmar Rav, who is trying to follow the Ratzon Hashem, than I would be to David Ben Gurion. And you have to understand the complexity
of being able to say that.
Okay?
Cool.